And now, to introduce our next speaker. Excuse me. All right. John Mason Hodges is a conductor, lecturer, composer, and writer. He holds his degrees in orchestral and opera conducting from the University of Maryland and Indiana University, and has worked as a professional conductor 26 years. Is that right? Yeah, 26 years. He talks on aesthetics, classical education, the arts. He's been published in numerous journals and articles, and he helped found Westminster Academy. So please join me in welcoming John Hodges to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you all again. You know, before I start the talk, we were talking so much in Andrew's talk lately, about forgiveness, and I thought about something I've been studying lately, and I thought I'd pass it on to you first. You know the parable about the unforgiving servant? You know the one? I reread that recently and thought, gee, you know, this is a much darker parable than I remember. If you remember how it goes is this fellow owes 10,000 talents to the king. And I did the math. A denarius is 1 day's labor. A talent is 6,000 denarii. So that's 6,000 days' labor. Think of it that way. And 10,000 talents is 164,000 years of labor. So that's what he owes. And the king says, I'm going to sell you into slavery with your wife and children to pay off the debt. And he begs for forgiveness, and the king relents and says, all right, I've forgiven you your debt. The entire 10,000 talent debt is gone. Imagine the weight lifted from this fellow. And then he goes out and he finds a fellow servant who owes him 100 denarii. You remember a denarius is a day's labor, so it's not nothing, it's 100 days' labor. That's a debt. But compared to 164,000 years, it's nothing at all. And yet he can't forgive his fellow servant. When he's called back to the king places the entire 10,000 talent debt back on him. It's not a revocable, it's a revocable promise to relieve this debt, it seems. And then he says the part that I think is so dark. He doesn't say, I'm going to sell you and your family into slavery. He said that before, you remember. Now he's angry. And he says, I'm going to turn you over to the torturer until you can pay the debt back in full. Now, there's never going to be a day when he can pay back that debt. So he's going to be tortured for eternity. That's if anything depicts hell, I think that's it. And then, as though we don't get it, Jesus says to us, and so my heavenly Father will deal with you if you don't forgive your brothers from your heart. You have been forgiven 10,000 talents worth of sin. Every sin you've ever done to another person was first done to him. So you owe him for every one of them. You only owe your brother for a few. That's why this makes some sense, this parable. But the danger is that we might teach some people that they have been so offended in this world that they don't need to forgive. You see? You've been so offended, you deserve justice. You deserve to get your rights back. And if the church teaches that to the world, we're sunk. Because the only way out The only way out of all these conflicts that we have, these genuine wrongs that we've done to one another, they're not fake wrongs, they're real. But the only way out of them is to forgive as we've been forgiven. That's the only way. So the church must not, I dare not teach that some kind of justice is what we're after. It's a very dangerous thing. And what it might very well do is actually teach that wounded person who needs to learn to forgive. It's not an easy thing to do, but that's what he needs to do, to teach that person that he doesn't need to forgive, and if that's the case, then he is going to be turned over to the torturer forever. Don't do that to them, please, I beg of you. Fight it where you find it. Remind people that there is forgiveness, that that's the only way out. I'll just tell you that because it's been on my heart. And it speaks to a degree to this idea of two worlds, that there's the world of forgiveness and there's the world of justice. We want to say, I want justice in the world. Of course we do. Of course we do. But the one thing that we dare not ask for is justice. If we were to go to God and shake our fist at him and say, I want justice, there's only one way to go. He'll give it to you if you want it, really. But you don't want it. I'm telling you, you don't want it. Because we do owe him everything. We do owe him everything. All right. Well, there are two worlds. There is the world that Augustine talks about in the city of God. There's the city of man and there's the city of God. I get that. But what I want to try and talk about is, of course, the city of man, city of God is a division that comes about by the fall, right? It's after the fall that we have this dichotomy, and that we want to, as the Lord's Prayer goes, bring about his will here as it is in heaven. Well, I want to talk about the creation, the two worlds that come in the creation before the fall, because I think in the creation we've got two worlds already. They are the world of the visible and the world of the invisible. And the two of them are one. You can make the distinction. It's reasonable to make distinctions, but it's not reasonable to separate them from each other. When God made, he made all things visible and invisible, as we just heard. And the interesting thing for us as educators is that when we teach stories and music and art and the history of our culture and so on, all of that is the manifestation in this world of those invisible things. So we're talking about trying to bridge the gap, connect up the visible and the invisible. What do we see by faith that we then can form the world into to be able to communicate it to others? And so we write music, and so we create cathedrals, and so we write poems, and so we paint paintings, and so on. We even shape the language that I'm using right now in order to communicate to you, because it's exactly what we're doing. Community and communicate have the same root, and that requires a language. And all of these things that we're teaching are simply the ability to communicate. And what is it we're communicating? Well, we're communicating that which we know by revelation, by apocalypse. That's a great word, isn't it? Apocalypse. I always think of zombie apocalypse when I think of apocalypse. But it really means revelation, doesn't it? So that in the Odyssey, when we meet Odysseus for the first time, he's on the island of just went right out of my head. Calypso, thank you, Calypso. And Calypso simply means hidden, right? So apocalypso is to be revealed. So he's hidden on the island of Calypso, you see, apocalypse. Well, I wanted you to get a sense for this pre-fall idea of the visible and invisible, in that God, we're told in Colossians, is maker of all things visible and invisible. And in Romans 1, we hear that he's not only the maker of those things, but that we are somehow able to understand what he's made, the invisible qualities that he has, by way of what is made. Now, he means, of course, the physical, visible world that he made, but I want to argue it also means the physical, visible world that we make in imitation of his creation. So we ought to be writing stories. We ought to be crafting music. We ought to be painting paintings, because we are forever going to be worshiping and proclaiming the glories of God. We can do it right here and right now. That's the purpose of the arts. That's the reason we make them. I hope you hear that. There are other examples of how it is that the devil would like to see these things separated. He wants to take what God makes that's whole in parts, because God's all about harmony, right? Let's stop for a second. You know about harmony. Harmony is where you take disparate things and you bring them together so they fit together to make a new whole, you know. Well, we're told when God makes Adam, he makes him out of the dust of the earth, and he breathes into his nostrils the breath of life. And if you go back to the old King James, it says, and he became a living soul. Isn't that interesting that that's the way we called it? A soul. A soul is not the invisible part of you. Your soul is the whole of you, the visible and the invisible together. Well, the devil hates that. And he wants to see it separated. And so he brings death into the world by way of convincing us to sin. So he encourages Adam and Eve to disobey God, and in doing so, death comes into the world. And what is death but separation of the dust and the spirit? You see, the dust and the breath. They're not meant to be together, separated. They were meant to be put together and kept together. Well, that's why it is that in the salvation of the world, we are told in 1 Corinthians 15 that we're going to all be resurrected and we're going to be reunited and then go to judgment, of course. For the Christian, that's an exciting day. That's not a bad day. That's a great day. But we're going to be put back together again, as it were, you see. In death, we're separated. We can't be left there. It's not enough to just save our spirit. He wants to save all of us in the way he intended us to be. And so there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, and there's going to be a new resurrected body for you and me. Another example of joining things together is in marriage. He made Adam, created Eve from Adam, brought them together. They are two different. If you don't know this, you need to. They're different. I remember there was a Time magazine article one time, a cover story. This is 40 years ago probably, but it looked very surprised, you know, and the headline was, scientists discover that men and women really are different. I'm not a scientist, but I think I can see that. As the French say, vive la différence. Anyway, husbands and wives, men and women are different. They're meant to be together. They're designed to be together. They're meant to be one. They become one flesh. That's in marriage. That's the way it's supposed to be. What does the devil want to do but put his wedge in right there? That's where he hates the most. Anything that God has put together, I want to divide it. I want to stop it. Divorce, adultery, pornography, all the sexual sins, all the temptations to homosexuality, all the temptations to abuse your children, abortion, all of the things that go on are all to stick a wedge right in there between those two things that are meant to be together. In our Anglican kind of wedding services, I guess most people use this. There's a line in there, what God has put together, let no man put asunder. You know that idea? Well, that's wisdom. That's wisdom. If God has designed those things to fit together, don't mess with it. Don't take it apart. That's what we see happening. So, those are two two good examples, I think, of the idea that I'm trying to get across to you, which is that there is a visible world and there's an invisible world, and they're meant to be together. And we're supposed to recognize the relationship between them. We're supposed to be able to say, I know not only are there two and that they're together, but they're in hierarchy. That the visible world, the material world, owes its existence to the invisible world. And so, our culture today, in its desire to simply focus on the material, is not just mistaken, it's nearly diabolically mistaken. Because it's not only emphasized the importance of the physical, which God does, mind you, right? The physical is extremely important, enough to die for and to have a resurrection. So we know that the physical is not nothing. But to focus on it without the other is to divorce it, and I use that word properly, on purpose, to divorce it from its own source. Because the definitions of this physical world have to come from the invisible world. That's where they come from. And we have to hold those definitions by faith. That's the only way too, right? Because we can't see it, we can't prove it. It's by faith that we do this. And then it's not surprising that God then says to us, it's by faith that you're saved. It's not by works. You can't accomplish it on your own. You have to be willing to put your faith in the definitions that I've given you for human beings, for marriage, for love, for... you could go on all night long, all day long. It's the logocentrism that we were just hearing about. We want to be centered on the logos. And the way that we do that, of course, is by faith. Well, some of you have asked me about my musical. I'm writing a musical, and we just got it read in New York, and it's very exciting. But it's a story of Rumpelstiltskin, and we've adjusted it and added much to it. We've added in a romance, and we've added in a present-day aspect and all sorts of things, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details. But the key girl, the main girl in it, is this girl that spins straw to gold. Okay, well, she's in the present day, and we thought it would be cool if we could give her a real arc where she starts in the present day in one mode of thinking, wrong mode of thinking. She goes through the fairy tale story and comes back to her life in the present day, and she has a different attitude. She's learned something from the fairy tale, and so it's an attempt to, in a sense, defend fairy tales. We want to show how fairy tales are meaningful and significant in our lives. But also, we wanted to show how this particular ailment of our modern day gets satisfied, gets solved, gets resolved. The state she's in at the beginning of the show is a very hard-hearted kind of state, and she, for reasons I'm not going to go into, her mother died recently, and there's a lot of stuff going on in her life. But she's hard-hearted, and as a result, she sings a want song. We have what we call a want song for her. You know, if you know the musical theater, Disney kind of Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid and so on, they all have want songs pretty much at the beginning. So you get to know who the character is and what she wants and so on. Well, I want to be where the people are, you know, that kind of want song, right? Was that funny? Belle wants to get out of this provincial life, you know. She loves her books and so on. Okay, well, we thought, wouldn't it be cool if in our fairy tale we start off with a girl who sings a want song that she doesn't want anything about to have to do with fairy tales and handsome princes and magic and all that stuff. She says, that's for children, that's not for me. I don't want to have anything to do with that. I'm going to go out and I'm going to make my life in the world. And she's thinking purely in material terms. And she says, this is what I can get my hands around. This is what I can be in control of. I want to be in control of my life. Don't we all? Isn't that something we all kind of long for? We realize, if you think about it for half a second, that you haven't got anywhere near control of your life, that you have to trust in God. But she's obviously not doing that. Well, by the time she comes out of the other end, she has realized a lot of things that she learns during the fairy tale, and she has a different attitude, and she makes up with her father, who she's upset with, and she goes and confesses that she had the wrong heart toward the guy that's in love with her, and it all works out, and the handsome prince gets the princess, and it all happily ever after. That's the way it's supposed to work. But here's the reason I tell you this. I was telling this plot to a relative of mine, distant relative of mine, who's had just finished her first year of college. And I told her about that desire for the handsome prince and the magic and the magical world of life and so on. And she said she really liked that part of the plot. And I said, why? And she said, well, I just had my first year in college, and everything they're teaching us is what she's thinking at the beginning of your play. They're telling us there isn't any magic, there isn't any fairy tale, there isn't any handsome prince. Don't get your hopes up for that. You have to run your own life. You're in charge of everything. And the material is where you find your happiness. You see? Now, she wasn't one who was, well, she wouldn't call herself a Christian, I don't think. She was just, just hearing this plot for the first time. But the interesting thing is, she said, but all of us girls want it anyway. Now, I think that's telling. That's what's really going on here, you see. We do long for meaning beyond ourselves. We do. We can't help it. We do. We want there to be a handsome prince that wakes us up from our stupor. Snow White represents all of us, men and women both, She's the picture of the soul in longing for God. She bites into, of all things, a poisoned apple given to her by a jealous queen. And she's surrounded by people who can't do anything for her, and so they're represented by their height. So we call it Snow White and the 7 vertically challenged people. Fairy tales have that ability to teach us these things. And eventually, of course, she's found by the prince. And what's a prince but the son of a king who came from far away, and symbolizing his love for her, kisses her and wakes her up. That's the only thing that can wake her out of her death. And we're just like that. That's the situation we're in. So these fairy tales teach all sorts of amazing things. Beauty and the Beast teaches about how you have to love something before it's lovable, before it's lovely, let's say. You have to learn to do that, because this world is a broken place, and there's marvelous grace and good just under the surface. Well, I want to tell you a story. Oh, wait, before I do that, let me give you this. This is a speech from Merchant of Venice, you may know. Lorenzo in Act 5 says, "For do but note a wild and wanton herd or race of youthful and unhandled colts, fetching mad bounds, bellowing and neighing loud, which is the hot condition of their blood, if they but hear perchance a trumpet sound, or any air of music touch their ears, you shall perceive them make a mutual stand, their savage eyes turned to a modest gaze by the sweet power of music. Therefore, the poet did feign that Orpheus drew trees, stones, floods, since naught so stockish, hard, and full of rage, but music for the time doth change its nature. The man that hath no music in himself, nor is not moved with concord of sweet sounds, is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils. The motions of his spirit are dull as night, and his affections dark as Erebus. Let no such man be trusted. Mark the music." Now, for the point I'm making here, I hope you'll hear the word music as that which is inspired by the muses, not simply organized sound like we think of music. although it certainly includes that. How many of you know the 9 muses? Ah, Matt knows. The 9 muses are the children, the daughters of Zeus and a woman called Mnemosyne, a goddess called Mnemosyne. Do you know what Mnemosyne means? Memory. Very good. That's right. They are the goddesses, the 9 goddesses, in Herodotus calls them 9, who represent the strength of Zeus, the king of the gods, and combined with memory, the ability to know the past. Short past, long past. And they represent the 9 aspects of what we now call, I think, the arts and sciences in the universities. Let's see if I can go through them. I didn't plan to do this, so I'm probably not going to get them all. But let's see. Calliope is the muse of history. No, epic poetry. Sorry, epic poetry. You have epic poetry. You have lyric poetry, that love poetry. You have comedy and tragedy. You have music. You have what we would call mythology, what they called theology. You have dance. You have astronomy, and you have history. That's the 9 of them. There you go. I got it. Yeah, right. Yeah. I should know this. Did I get them all, Matt? Okay. Anyway, they are the ones who inspire the painters and the poets and the astronomers, interestingly enough. Have you been watching about this new telescope? It's very cool. The astronomers, and they all sing their inspiration. Now, for a conductor, that's enough for me. I could stop right now. Just the fact that they sing is enough. That's where all good things come from. Singing. So, Thucydides is supposedly inspired by Clio, the goddess of, the muse of history. You see? Homer is inspired by Calliope, the goddess of, or the muse of epic poetry. Okay. Well, that's where we get the word music anyway. Do you see? Music is that which is inspired by the muses. So it includes, especially for the Greeks, it includes poetry, song, rhythm, poetry, theater. All of those things come together in the muses. I've said this before, and so maybe some of you will remember this, but what astonishes me is that we use the word music now in a strange way. Because if to be mused is to be inspired by the goddesses, by the muses, right? That's to be mused. What would it mean to be amused? Have you ever thought of that? So it doesn't mean just not mused, but it might be at least momentary distraction from being mused, the hard work of being mused, right? And so we would go to, we'd stop our work for a short period of time and we'd go to an amusement park. But it's a temporary thing. It's a small thing. It's a respite from being mused. Okay. Today, though, our culture uses music to amuse ourselves. So we're living a kind of insane world. We don't understand music. Certainly, we don't understand it as that which is inspired by the muses. But we don't even understand organized sound as something that can open our eyes to things that we didn't see before. We think we want what we already know. We want what's comfortable. We want that makes us dance. And there's nothing wrong with amusement, you understand. And that's a possible thing that music can do. But to make music fully the intended to amuse is a complete contradiction in terms. Well, what I want to show you is about this speech. Shakespeare writes that a herd of colts in their natural state, hot condition of their blood, if they hear a trumpet sound or perceive music, it changes their ways. It changes them. It makes them take a mutual stand, he says. interestingly enough. Their savage eyes turn to a modest gaze by the sweet power of music. It's an interesting thing. He's saying that the horses are actually changed in their demeanor because of the fact that they hear music. And he's speaking this way not to sort of prove that, but using it as an example so that everybody already knows. The people he's speaking to would go, well, yeah, that's right. That's what happens to him. And then he talks about Orpheus, the great musician. You know the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, right? And how he has to go into hell to find her, and he's only allowed in because he's such a great musician. Plays music. But you know the whole story, I won't go into that. But anyway, Orpheus is the musician, right? So he's the one, he says, Orpheus feigns to draw trees, stones, and floods to change their natures. Music can actually change inanimate objects, he's arguing. Well, you can debate that if you want to. But that's what he's saying. And then he says this: any man that has no music in himself, nor is moved with concord of sweet sounds, is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils. What are they? What are they? Let me show you a couple of definitions I got. Treason, the offense of acting to overthrow one's government or to harm or kill its sovereign, a violation of allegiance to one's sovereign or to one's state, the betrayal of a trust or confidence, breach of faith, treachery. He's saying the one who doesn't appreciate music, mind you, we're talking about the muses now, okay, not just simply music, but it includes music. One who doesn't appreciate music is fit only for that. I used to think that murder was the worst thing that a person could do. It's a terrible, horrible crime. Till I read Dante. And at the very bottom of hell, of course, are not the murderers. They're pretty low down there, mind you. But the worst is the treasonous, the person who betrays a confidence, the person who kisses you and then turns you over to the Romans. That's the worst, you see? So a treasonous person is one who wants to overthrow the order of things, the government, or to kill a sovereign, or to betray a trust, breach of faith. That's what he says. What's a stratagem? A stratagem is a secret plan to overthrow or gain, a plan, a scheme, a trick for surprising or deceiving an enemy. Artifice, ruse, a trick devised or used to attain a goal or to gain an advantage over an adversary or a competitor. A trick, a scheme for the purposes of deception. Here again is this similar to treasonous, the idea of betraying somebody, lying to somebody. Oh no, it'll be okay. Just come on in, and then killing him. It's like that. Stratagems are those things that you use to bring about the secret motives that you have that you've hidden from everyone else. It's deception. It's breaking the seventh commandment. Spoils. What are spoils? They're the valuables seized by violence, especially in war. That's what this definition said. Now, why would Shakespeare say that somebody who doesn't appreciate music is going to be treasonous, treacherous, strategizing, and looking for spoils? Well, I want to argue that it's the natural result. Because music is the way to bridge the relationship of the invisible, which gives definition to all things and meaning to all things, with the physical that we live in moment by moment. And if you can't appreciate that link, then you will focus completely on the physical. And you'll do so self-centeredly, because how else can you? If you were to give up heaven and only take earth, how could you not think of yourself only as the most important thing? In the end, there are really only two gods. There's the God and there's you. Are you going to have allegiance to him, or are you going to have allegiance to you? It's really that simple. It's not, there aren't a lot of other things. There's all sorts of smoke and mirrors that the devil throws at you. Oh, you need to have more money. You need to have this person married to you. Need to have this job and this career. You need to have that fame. You need all those things. But it's you that he's talking about. He's talking about you sacrificing for you. And if he can get you to sacrifice for you, all his ends are met. So it makes perfect sense to me, anybody who doesn't appreciate those glorious connections between the visible and the invisible is going to be sucked into being used for treason, stratagems, and spoils. So Shakespeare really gets it, I think. He understands that it's a matter of, it's not just being a bad guy. It's these particular bad things. And they happen to be pretty bad. So what I want to do is tell you a story. Oh, I threw this in just in case you've never seen it. The British Museum, this is a statue, a frieze statue in the British Museum in London called The Apotheosis of Homer. And it's going to be hard for you to see, I'm sure, but on the bottom, there are 3 different layers there. You see that? There's the bottom layer where there's, on the far left, there's a fellow seated in a chair, and behind him 2 people with crowns on, and at his feet are 2 children. And then there's a whole line of people that are bringing gifts to him. And that's Homer in the chair there. And the 2 children at his feet are the Iliad and the Odyssey. And the 2 behind him are the king and queen of Greece. Athens, probably. But above them are the heavens. And in the heavens you have the 9 muses. And you have at the very top Zeus reclining, you see. And next to him standing is Mnemosyne, the mother of the muses. And all the 9 muses are there, and I think probably Apollo is there too. Yeah, I think Apollo is the one on the far left with the lyre in his hands. But this is the honor that the Greeks gave to Homer. This was carved in 225. Yeah, it's the dates on here. 225 BC, something like that. So it's quite old. Just thought you might want to know. If you ever go to the British Museum, look for this in the Greek segment. I want you to hear this. Culture is the physical manifestation of the beliefs of a people. Culture is the physical manifestation of the beliefs of a people. Those beliefs might be true or false. They might be wise or unwise. But we make things. We are homo faber. We are human beings that make things. And we make things in accordance with what we believe. You've probably heard somebody say that politics is downstream from culture. Have you heard that phrase lately? People talk that way now. Politics is downstream from culture. Well, there's some truth in that. The way our culture thinks is the way we're going to elect our officials. And so we are, well, I was going to say we get the people we want. Sorry to say. But I want to say faith, belief, sorry, let's say it this way. Culture is downstream from belief. So what you believe generates the culture, and the culture then makes plausible certain characteristics that we want in our political leaders. And so that's how politics is downstream from culture. Does that make sense? So what you believe generates culture, and what culture is generates political ends, means, and so on. But what I'm talking about here is simply the middle section of that. Culture is the physical manifestation of the beliefs. So the beliefs become culture when they're made into artifacts, when they're made into physical things. If we think that speaking to a big group of people like this is worthwhile, we will build podiums like this. We just do. We make them. We make sound systems so that we can be heard without stressing out people's throats or something. That's what we do. If we think drinking water is a good idea, then we make glasses and we arrange for plumbing. You know what I mean? We make things. So a culture is the accumulation of the physical manifestations of what we believe would be worthwhile. Okay, well, it applies to the arts as well. We write music, we write poems, we paint paintings based on what it is we think is worthwhile. That's how we do. So I want to tell you a story. Let's see if I can do this like this. It's a Russian folk tale, a Russian fairy tale, about a prince who goes out into the woods one day alone hunting. This is the mystery of the woods. For all of you musicians, you'll hear an augmented fourth interval all the time that makes things very uneasy. There it is, and the French horn. And then he spies something very interesting. He sees a bird, but it seems like the bird is on fire, and it's flying and soaring and jumping and dancing, and he calls it a firebird. And this is what the firebird dance sounds like. This is where he spots the firebird. And now the dance of the firebird that he witnesses. You hear the fluttering and the dancing, and then suddenly trumpets. He's enchanted by this firebird. He thinks, I have to catch this firebird. I'm a hunter. I have to catch it. There's a piccolo. And he captures it in the net. There's so much I want to tell you about the music, and I don't have time. Okay, let me just tell you one thing, okay? This is in 6/8 for those of you musicians. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. The wonderful thing about 6/8 is that it can be divided into subgroups in threes. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 1, 2, like that, or in twos. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Can you hear that? You see that? So that's what he does. In fact, Bernstein did, I like to be in America, okay, by me in America, da 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 dee dee dee, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. You hear that? Well, that's what he's doing, only it's subtler, because he goes back and forth between 3 and 2 to keep you off your feet, right? Because if you've seen a bird, it's unpredictable how he's going to hop, when he's going to hop and when he won't. So imagine being able to take music and craft it in such a way as it gets at the nature of birds. Not just their song, because he gets that too, right? But he gets the fluttering of these birds, like wings and so on. But he also gets this sort of hopping thing, and I want to see if I can show it to you quickly. It goes. Let me see if I can sing it to you first. It goes, bum, bum, bim, bum, 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 like kind of like that offbeat. I'm not doing it exactly right. I'll sing it for you. When I hear it, I'll be able to show you again. Let's see. There we go. It's in the pizzicato, in the cellos and the basses. Listen to the lower strings right now. Could you hear it? It's wonderful. It's just so very creative and aware, and turning something that is purely of the natural world into something poetic and making it communicable to us and that we can delight in. Okay, so he captures this firebird, and when he does, the firebird turns out to be sentient and can speak. And she says to him, "Please let me go. If you will let me go, I am magical, and I will give you one of my feathers, and you keep it. And when you need me, you can call me, and I'll be there, and I can help you with my magic." So he's a kind prince, and he says, okay, and he lets her go. And she gives him this feather, and he takes the feather and puts it in his vest and keeps it, thinking, when will I ever need this feather? When will I need to call on the firebird? Of course, there'll be a time, won't there? That's, if you know fairy tales, it's not by accident that he's come across this firebird. Okay, well, then as he goes on through the woods, he comes across an ancient castle with a great wall and a courtyard. And in the courtyard, he looks through the locked gates, and he sees in the courtyard there are all these statues of men. And it's clear they're not just carved statues, they're men that have been turned to stone. Think the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe at the end, you know. The witch has turned everybody to stone, right? So he sees this and he realizes this is not good. But about the time he's trying to think what he should do, out into the courtyard come 13 maidens, 13 princesses. Some of you know this story. Do you know this story? Yeah, you were nodding your heads. They come out and they dance, because it's a ballet after all. This is a ballet by Stravinsky called The Firebird, if you haven't caught on yet. And they dance, and he's mesmerized by their beauty, and one of them really trips his trigger, and he says, "She's the one for me." And he falls in love with her, and now not only does he want to help these men who are in stone, but he wants to meet this girl too, see. So what does he do but try and open the gates? And he can't open the gates, they're locked shut, so he climbs over the wall and into the courtyard. And about the time that he's going to talk to this girl, who should come out but the owner of the castle? And the owner of the castle is an evil fellow called Kachai. And he's kind of a monster, kind of a creature monster type person. Well, he's the one who's been turning everybody to stone, and I think our prince is about to be the next one turned to stone. And of course, what does he do but call on the... oh wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me play you the music of the princesses. If it's wonderful to be able to capture the nature of a bird, what about capturing the nature of the feminine? What a great idea. Let's see if you think so too. This one? That strings with their mutes on, listen. wish I could play it all for you. It's so glorious. It's such beautiful stuff. Well, by the time he meets this girl, I mean, how could you not fall in love with her, right? There's something deeply feminine about it that each individual woman understands and exhibits in certain ways, right? But it's what he's getting at, the nature of something. He's not getting at an individual person. He's trying to get at the nature of the feminine, and that's what the art is about. You see, you try and see, by experience of the invisible, and by faith, we take the sounds and we mold them like clay into something that can depict that invisible thing. That's what great composers are trying to do. That's what great clay makers are trying to do. Well, about the time that he gets to talk to her, of course, the bad guy comes out, and it's a great surprise. And if I'm not mistaken, it may still be, let's see. Yes, this is the very end of in the suite. This is how he ends the princess's dance. And then he surprises everybody by suddenly jumping into what he call the infernal dance. And I'll play you just a minute of it, and then I'll play you the end of it. We won't have time for the whole thing. And then a final statement, one. The clarinet, softest instrument in the orchestra. There we are. And this is the dance. This is the beginning of the infernal dance. Well, what happens is when the prince sees that he's about to be turned to stone like everybody else, he calls out for the firebird, pulls out his feather and calls for the firebird. And who should show up but the firebird? She makes it there in time. And what she has the ability to do is to make music so that he, the bad guy, and all of his monster henchmen start to dance against their will. They start to dance. And they dance faster and faster and faster and faster until they're all exhausted and they fall over. And so they're of no, they can't do any harm anymore. So let me play you the very end of it, because it gets just to show you how he explains this faster and faster bit. If you don't know this ballet and this music, you must go and hear it. It's really wonderful. The next two parts are completely priceless. There's what they call a berceuse, which is a lullaby for these monsters, and you begin to see the people coming out of their stone. And then finally, there's this grand, glorious finale where the two are united. The prince and his princess are united. The people are all saved, and the firebird comes flying above them all, and it's a glorious ending. So, why on earth would you want to tell a story like that? What a compelling story! Isn't that an engaging story for children, even, right? But even for us adults, fairy tales are engaging like that. Well, I think it's because it speaks of these natures of things. We ought to be teaching our boys that they should be out on an adventure, that they should be honored for their desire to have adventures, to go hunting, to find a princess, to fight a dragon. That's what they're meant to do. That's what they're built to do. Encourage that in them. We ought to be honoring the feminine in our girls. It is of the highest nobility, of the highest nobility. I have to say this. I was watching the end of the Wimbledon tennis match. Are you all tennis match fans? See, you saw Sampras win his that was a big deal. Well, you know, who do they get to come out to give the grand championship prize but Kate Middleton? Wow. She just personifies elegance. The way she walks, the way she dresses, the way she smiles, everything about her seems to be, I just think she captures something of this beauty that is feminine, that is, I can't say this, I can't overstate this, it's priceless. It's priceless. To squander it, to have a culture that takes the feminine and debases it, or ignores it, or can't tell the difference between a boy and a girl. I could never be a Supreme Court justice, I guess. It's essential. We should be honoring the feminine. We should be honoring the masculine. We should be honoring the differences and the wondrous unity that they have with each other. This is where we are. Well, where do we get those notions, those ideas of natures? Where do we get them? Well, we get them from the invisible world. We get them from revelation of God. We get them from the story that he created Adam this way, and that he made Eve this way, and that the two of them are meant to be together forever. That's what they're meant to be. We get a picture of the damage that has been done by the fall in those things, but we also get what Edith Schaefer used to call leftover beauty. After the fall, everything is shattered, but you still see reflected beauty in the pieces. And we should be looking for that and drawing it out and pointing it out to people. And we do it only by faith. You can't do it by simply looking at the world. You have to look at the world through the eyes of the invisible, you see? And there you have the purpose of the education that you're doing. You are seeing the invisible and you're making it manifest so that it can be communicated to the next generation. It is a very, very important thing to do. Civilization requires men and women. It's what it requires. We have boys and girls that we are training to be men and women, and they are to be given the best we can give them, and that's going to be done by way of what we teach them. Human beings are not just born, they are made human by what we give them. So that's why I give you these fairy tales, and I give you the example from my little attempt, our little attempt. I'm writing this musical with a cohort, and we're trying to get that idea across. I'll say one word. This will probably be a problem for some. Have any of you seen the movie or the original play musical Into the Woods? Do you know that? If you know Into the Woods, you know that in the first act, all these different fairy tale characters end up with what we call a happily ever after kind of ending. They're all happy. And then Act 2 starts. And in Act 2, everything falls apart. They go from that position into divorce and death and fear and abandonment and all sorts of ugly things. And at the end of the play, we're given a kind of moral of the story, and the moral of the story is be careful what you teach your children. Because you can teach them something that will lead them astray. It'll give them the idea, give them false expectations about life. There aren't any handsome princes, you see? There isn't magic. These things are not going to happen. Life is hard. Granted, life is hard, but that's not the purpose of fairy tales. You see? So I think, as much as I admire Stephen Sondheim's great compositional skill, he's an amazing composer, I don't think that story is right. I don't think it understands fairy tales. And so in a sense, I'm hoping our show is going to do the opposite of that. That is to take somebody in that frame of mind at the beginning of the show and teach her through a fairy tale that there are handsome princes, that there is life, there is love, there is magic, and there is, fairy tales are not just for children. And that's the truth. How many of you read Orthodoxy, Chesterton's Orthodoxy? Some of you read that? Oh, drop everything. If you haven't read that, you should read that. There's a fantastic chapter in there about that he calls the ethics of Elfland. And I want to end with this. He says, fairy tales are for the purpose of giving you an appreciation for the magic and the marvel of the created order that is in this world. It's magical, he says. And what we do is we see this world so often, repeatedly so often, that we take it for granted. We don't appreciate it. He says, the way he puts it is, in fairy tales, rivers run with wine so that we might always be astonished in our world to see rivers running with water. We should be astonished by that it happens. Here's how he puts it. If all you have ever seen in life were chicken eggs and had never seen a chicken, how in a million years would you ever imagine a chicken? It doesn't make any sense at all that a chicken, that feathery thing, would come from that shelled thing. If all you've ever known were apple blossoms, how in the million years would you ever imagine an apple? There's no connection between the two of them. He says, in fairy tales, princes become bears. And he said, I've seen princes that have acted like bears. Bears and princes are far closer together in my imagination than apple blossoms and apples, or eggs and chickens. The only explanation is magic. We see the sun rise every day and we take it for granted. It's going to rise again. It always comes up in the east, always sets in the west. Everything's the same, right? But Chesterton says, no. When you have a little child and he runs up to you and says, spin me around, throw me around like this. You say, okay. So you lift him up by his arms and you flip him over and you put him back down. And what does he say? Do it again. So you do it again, and he says, do it again. And you do it the third time, and by now you're thinking, this is really boring. Okay, I'll do it one more time, and then Uncle John has got to go do something, He's not the least bit bored by repetition. He thinks it's great. I am bored with repetition. I am too old to appreciate repetition. And the way Chesterton says is, when the sun comes up every day, it doesn't have to come up. It comes up because he said, do it again. Do it again. I like repetition, see. When the daisies, the flowers come up in the springtime, every spring, he says, do it again. Do it again. I'd like to see that again. He's not the least bit bored. And the way Chesterton puts it is, God is far younger than we are. He still appreciates the greatness of these things. And what we need to do is to have our eyes opened again to these things that are astonishing, but we've seen them so many times we take them for granted, like eggs and chickens and so on. So I hope that helps. That's why we look at fairy tales. That's why we want magic in our lives. That's why we want, in our stories this way. We don't assume. I appreciate what Andrew said about teaching the Iliad. People are not going to go out and worship Zeus by reading the Iliad. They're able to condense or to draw from it principles and interesting depths about what it means to be human. Well, it's the same way here. If you tell a story of the Firebird, People are not going to say, well, I'm going to go out and find a bird that's on fire. In fact, if I don't find one, I'll make one. That's not it exactly, is it? No, it's just that we think, man, I would love to have that kind of experience. Well, let me tell you, it's there. It's part of who we are, but we see it in the arts. We see it in the creativity that we've come across from people who are capable enough at their craft. Because, art just simply means skill. For the medievals, art meant skill. You're just good at carving stone. You're good at composing. You're good at playing the violin or something, It's a skill. But when you have the ability to play the violin, you can pass on to people the marvelous melodies like that oboe player did just then. Da da dee da 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 dee da 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 da. Man, how wonderful. I have to say this. I got 1 second left. I heard several different performances of that piece before I chose one to play for you. And I heard this French orchestra. I don't remember the guy's name who's the conductor. It was terrible. And they got to this. It's a professional orchestra. He got to this moment and he cues the oboe player. And honest to goodness, she and he conducted and played it like this. Da da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da da. Well, it's all the right notes, but there's nothing of the marvel of it. Nothing. It was sterile and dull. And what I wanted to hear was da da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da da. Please. There's so much life in that melody, you see. And so that's what I mean by skill. You have to have a skill and an imagination to bring this to bear. But what if you were able to plant into the mind and the heart of your students, what if you were able to plant in them the possibility of that beauty? You don't even have to recreate it yet. You just have to know that there's the possibility of that in the world. And when that's possible, you judge all the other things a little differently, When you know good music, you say, well, yeah, but it's not that. This is okay, but it's not Brahms. It's not, it's not Stravinsky or something. But just to be able to plant in their minds that is a possibility is a huge step forward. And then they are hungry for it because you have their imaginations on your side, They want to find that. And so if you tell them that it's not there, you can do a lot of damage. But if you can give them the opportunity to see it for themselves, sense it for themselves, then you've done them great help. Just remember, culture is necessary. Culture is necessary for civilization to continue. And culture is the physical accumulation of the beliefs of a people. So what do you believe, and how are you going to convey that? God bless you all. Thanks for listening.